Okay, thanks for joining us tonight. We are carrying on our study of redeeming the time, and we are looking at examples from the New Testament. And Sunday, I talked about redeeming the time with our family, and we looked at ways to redeem our time with our children. If we have children, or going to, or did, or have, all those things of spending time and how to best work with children to redeem that time that we have with them. So we're going to finish that up tonight. We have another point to kind of look at tonight, and then we're going to look at spouses and kind of wrap that up. So that's what we are planning on doing tonight. Before we get started, Heath, I'm going to pick on you. You're the front row. You're reported for duty here. So would you lead us in a prayer? Thanks.
Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for another day of life, for the Christian family, for salvation. Father, we ask that you be with us tonight. Please be with our hearts and minds. Help clear one another. Everything please be with us. All your blessings.
Amen. Thanks. All right, so last week we looked at, like I said, redeeming the time with our children or with children. And so, some of the things that we, talked about are obviously, as parents, we're given the duty to train up our children in a certain way. That's our highest calling, or our highest duty is to train them or to raise them in a certain way. And so obviously, it's a big duty for us to try and raise them in the Christian faith and to understand that, learn it, to be fruitful Christians. And it may, sound easy, but it doesn't always turn out to be an easy task for sure. And so it's something that the Lord entrusts to us as parents, and so we have to very much, take it very seriously. And so we looked at ways that we can, that we're able to do that. And so, one of the things we looked at is instilling respect in your children, respecting your children, but having your children respect you. And the way that can be done is by you acting respectfully. So there's a lot of respect that goes on, but if you behave in a manner that makes a child want to respect you or to have, to obey you, then they're more likely to listen to what you have to say to them. If you act in a way that's disrespectful, that's childish, that, you don't hold up your end of the word, you don't hold up what you tell them to do, or what you're going to tell them to do, if it's more like, do as I say, but not as I'm doing, that doesn't instill any respect in children or anyone that you're trying to mentor or to raise. And so, that's one of the things we talked about. And once children can have respect in their parents and respect in their parents' lifestyle, then hopefully, they have more of an open mind to listen to teachings they have, respect for others that teach the gospel, and things along those lines. But that respect can be easily broken by, not behaving in a way that's parental, that not behaving in a way that is of leadership or of guidance. And we also talked about, that sometimes, I think that we see so many parents that want to be their child's friend. I would hate if my child was upset with me, or I don't want them to be upset, I want to be their friend. I think that's a mistake. We're not here to be our children's necessarily friend. It's an outcropping of being a parent, but it's not necessarily our duty is to be their friend, because being their friend doesn't discipline, or being a friend doesn't instruct, and being a friend doesn't necessarily always guide them. Sometimes children are mad at you. The easier thing to do is to let your child do what they want to do. That's way simpler than offering any sort of guidance or discipline. It's just usually way simpler to give them their way, nobody argues, and we're happy. But that doesn't do anything to train them up. That doesn't do anything to discipline them. That doesn't do anything to give them any sort of guidance or to elicit any type of reason for them to obey you. And so it's much more difficult to be someone that trains someone than to be someone that's just their friend. And I think that that's from my observations that may or may not be keen, I don't know, but those are what I see that a lot is parents that, and not necessarily here at church, but in things that I just observe of friends out in the world, people that I deal with, they desperately want to be their child's friend and not upset them. And unfortunately, sometimes it can't be that way. To upset them sometimes is not pleasant, but it also is guidance or discipline or growth for them. And so that's some of the things about building that respect back and forth between you and the child. Once again, respect doesn't mean necessarily corporal discipline. It just means acting in a way that's respectful, to cause them to want to listen to your word, to listen to what you're teaching, to what you say, to have respect for you and you as a parent. So that's one of the things we kind of looked at last week, or Sunday. So another point, and we touched on this a lot, so maybe a little bit of rehash, and it seems very, very self-explanatory, but another point I wanted to look at is just spending time in the Bible with your children. And I know we kind of touched on that a little bit, but I kind of want to go into it a little bit further. So if you turn with me to 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 16. So 2 Timothy 3 and verse 16 says, "All Scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work." So, what more if we're talking about training a child, if you're talking about putting them on a guidance or on a path, it'd be more profitable than using the Scriptures, which is God-breathed, useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, and so the servant of God can be thoroughly equipped for every good work. That would thoroughly equip a child by teaching them the Scriptures, by allowing them to learn the Scriptures. And so while it seems, sometimes the things, when we say it, it's like, well, duh, of course, you want to teach your child the Scriptures, but sometimes the day-to-day breakdown of it just doesn't always happen. I know in our family we get so busy with just things that are going on, school, activities, work, things in the evening, things like that we sometimes push those things to the side. And it's not a good thing, but it happens. It just kind of sometimes is the thing that we're like, well, at the end of the day, we have a little bit of time, so let's, do a little Bible study, or let's have Bible reading at night. And it ends up just being at the end of the day. We try to have Alex read us the Bible every night before we go to bed, and sometimes it just, we're too tired, he's too tired, it gets pushed away, and that's a very bad thing, but it happens. And so it should be a priority. So I'm not saying that's a good thing or a good example. It should be a priority to us before the other activities that we have or the other things that we're doing. And so, we have to really examine ourselves at any point. Also, children at any age need to see us as parents studying the Bible, working in the Bible, teaching others, helping others. I think that it's very powerful to see, for me, even if it's not my parents, but growing up seeing others my age willing to teach, or a little older willing to teach, or people willing to teach or take on a public task, that's very encouraging. That was encouraging to me, because I thought, well, if I'm able to do that, or if they're able to do that, I should be able to do this. I should be able to do that. So if someone X can do it, I should be able to do it. So same thing is children see their parents doing it and they learn from them. Mom's teaching a class, or dad's teaching in worship or leading in public worship or things like that. And so it must be something that's, seen. If we as parents shy away from those obligations or doing those things, how can we expect our kids or children to, want to do those type of things too as well? And so, obviously it seems very, very self-explanatory, but we just must make it a priority in our families to have Bible study time, to have teaching time, to practice, if your son's doing song leading, these are just examples, or song leading, or even as they get older and teenagers and they're out, they can drive and they're gone, they have their own schedule, it still must be priorities to study the Bible, to talk about the Bible, to take time to, examine it, even when everybody's going in different directions, because when you build that bond together, then, you've studied these things together, you've learned these things together. And like I said, it's very easy to say, but sometimes it's difficult to do in the actual day-to-day mechanics of it. And I know that is, that's a fact. And so the answer might be at times that, sometimes maybe we have to cut down on things we're doing, extra activities, extra sports, extra this, extra that. And, so Alex is the type that whatever you ask him to do, he's going to do it. You want to do this, you want to do that. He may be awful at it, but he's going to do it. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. He'll do 100 things that he can, and so, you just have to pare it down sometimes and say, we can't do this, we can't do that. And we just, you just have to find the time. And maybe he's not going to be, the top athlete because he doesn't have time to go practice that all the time. Maybe there's other things we need to be doing. Maybe he'll be at church services instead of, this specific athletic event. And so those are things that we just have to make those choices, even though that's hard. And once again, that's where you're not always your kid's friend, because their friend would say, yeah, go on and do what you need to do. But as a parent, you have to make those decisions. Anybody have any comments or anything they want to make so far? Just kind of rattling on. Yes, Margaret. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's very good. Yeah. Just talking about things that God has done, or ways we can act like Christians, or things like that. Yeah, that's exactly right. Anybody else have a comment, or they have their hand up? Anybody? Yes, Chris? Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's harder to do than telling them what to do. It's easy to say it, not always easy to do it. Okay, thanks. So in general, talking about spending time with children, even if it's not it's kind of to Margaret's point, if it's not even necessarily biblical time or biblical study, just spending time with your kids, just doing things with your kids. The more, I believe the more of a bond that you have with your children, the more time you spend with them, the more of a bond you're going to have. And, you can find activities that they enjoy doing or something they like. Also, too many times, maybe I'm on my soapbox tonight. I don't know, but I'm the teacher, so I'm going to say what I want to say. But anyway, so too many times I see parents that are like, oh, this is what I want my kid to become. So this is what we're going to do because I was a football star. You will be too. So that's what we're going to do. I've already decided it. But that kid doesn't want to. So you have to find what that child wants to do. It's not you, it's them. So you find that activity that works well for them together. Now, this should be something that doesn't take away from, Bible time or, service time, but it is spending time with them and you're growing that bond. And those are times like Margaret said, that you can use to, just everyday activities to talk about different things like that, different things about, worship or things that come up, but just spending that time with them. And it goes back to, if they have a bond with you, they're going to be more likely to understand what you have to say, the examples you have to say, the teachings you have to say, if you're bonded with them. If their time or their free time is spent away from you with other people continually, not with the family, with outside influences, who are they going to listen to? They're going to listen to their outside influences more, especially the older they get. Same thing we talked about previously, younger kids. If you're choosing to have someone else raise your children, who do you think their bond is going to be with? How are you going to spend time with someone or redeem the time with someone if you're not with them? It just makes sense if you're making that choice to have someone else raise your children. And so it's just things to think about as we go through, it and go through the life and the time that we spend with them. So, it also may mean sometimes we have to outlimit our outside activities. Maybe there's things that we like to do, and maybe I can't do those things. Maybe I can't do that thing because I need to spend more time with Alex, and so that takes away from my special time that I have to do, and sometimes I have to limit those things. So those are just some things to kind of look at and kind of think about. Once again, as I said in the beginning of yesterday or Sunday, every situation is different. I'm not an expert. I'm not anything like that at all. All I can think of is observations, and when we look at the Bible, biblical ways that we can instruct our children. Once again, every situation is different. Different things happen for everybody, and in different examples and different variables that come into play. So there's no set way in any way, but there's just, maybe some things or tips or ideas that, I've thought of as, father kind of grow a family and spend time with my child, and just sort of things that I've seen maybe too as well. You may have any comments before we wrap this part up? Yes, ma'am.
Well, after everything, gay and homosexual. What you're going to see find from talk to me, read the Bible. So they had to really talk.
Yeah, that's a good example, and those are times that you have to take that stance and explain it to them. Does anyone else have any comments or anything? Okay, thanks. So next thing I want to look at is redeeming the time with your spouse, or with your spouse. And so I can't say I'm an expert on this because I've only been married once, so I can only say with one time is a charm. But anyway, so when we look at the Bible in the New Testament, that's my first wife, Jennifer. Anyway, when we look at the Bible, they don't really have this is the way, there's not necessarily a case study of a husband and wife, and this is, there'll be examples, but especially in the New Testament, there's really not a whole lot. Like in the Old Testament, if we follow that, then I would have 32 wives, and that's probably not the best idea. So we look in the New Testament, but really there's not a whole lot of family examples like we would like. So, we can take some. So I wish the Bible would just have a chapter and say, this is the way you do it. But, sometimes we have to pull and grow from that. So obviously, first off, in any relationship, there should be, there should be love. And if we look at Ephesians 5 and 25, if we can turn there. Husbands, love your wife just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. So in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself up for her, so in the way that Christ, gave himself sacrificed himself for the church, husbands should have that same type of love for their wife. And once again, it's kind of like talking about having studies with your children. Sure, it's easy to say, but do your actions really fulfill that? Do your actions really fulfill loving your wife or willing to sacrifice your life for your wife? That might be, you might bring her flowers, or you might be friendly to her. You might let her buy things you want, but do you also badmouth her at work? Do you also, flirt with other people? Are you doing the things that, are you 100% in love with her in the way that Christ loved the church? So, is that something that is 100% of your actions, 100% of what you do? And so, while most husbands would probably say, yes, I love my wife, do your actions 100% of the time fulfill that? Not just something to, for people to think about or to consider. If you truly love your wife, then you obviously, the actions will always fulfill that. And sometimes they don't. And so we have to always be very careful of that 100% of the time we are living that out and living out loving her in the way that Christ did the church. Okay, if we look at, let's also turn to Titus 2 and 4. And Keith, do you want to read that for me?
That they admonish the young women to love their husbands, love their children.
Okay, so women should obviously love their husbands and love their children too as well. So obviously these are, commandments that in the scriptures for each to love one another. Also must be a partnership, of a husband and a wife working together. Each one has different strengths, each one has different weaknesses, or things that we, benefit one another. So if we look at the very first, husband and wife, let's look at Adam and Eve. So let's turn to Genesis 20 and verse 20. Let's see. Genesis 2. I'm sorry. Yeah, that was a little too far. So Genesis 2 and verse 21, or into verse 19 or verse 20. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with his flesh. And then the Lord God made woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to man. And the man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." So there's a lot there in this verse, or these verses to look at. It says the woman was to be a suitable helper, but definitely not inferior. A complement, someone to assist, but not in a servant way. They complement one another. Men and women have different traits, different characteristics, different things that one can do, the other may not do as well. And so they work together in these different roles. And so that's why God didn't create just more men for Adam to have as, worker bees. If they were just needing to, clean up the Garden of Eden, he could have created more men. Or if he needed more men, more Adams, just to name a bunch of animals, he could have done that. But he created a female to be his companion, to be his partner, and to be his helper. And so that's something that he did to be an assist, a helper, but not somebody that's second or inferior, to complement him. So not in any way would a woman be inferior to what the man is, just a different personality or a different trait, characteristic to assist Adam in this situation. Another thing that it says there is this is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife. So they become one flesh. So when a man and a woman, becomes married, then their family, their previous family, their parents are behind them. So that's why, their mom or their husband and their wife should be that main focus, not not their parents. Sometimes a lot of times, once again, you see, somebody and their parents are their main focus, and their husband is kind of the leftover, or the husband's parents are their focus and the wife is the leftover. And while obviously relationships with your parents are still strong, that's not your main focus. And that's definitely something that a parent should recognize in their own child and cut off, but a child should recognize in their parent if that's something that the parent is, insisting upon. And it's always clear that the main focus should be that spouse, not the parents, not their siblings, and not outside friends should be that spouse, and that should be their main goal or their main focus. It specifically says here and even at this point, you can see how important this is because God says this, but Adam didn't have a father, really, an earthly father. So he didn't have in-laws coming over. Eve didn't have in-laws coming over because there wasn't anybody. So we can see, though, how important it is did you get that? Did you see how smart I am? They didn't have in-laws at that time. But God wanted to know how important it was that these parents were not, your parents are not the new family, it's the spouse. And that's why it's very important to think of those things. And so if outside influence is your main focus, then that's something to look at and consider. And that's why I think it's really important that was put in here. Anybody have any comments they want to make up until this? Dan?
Intentional living. You have to be. You find up, or if your kids graduate college and you haven't started Bible study.
Yeah.
You haven't been intentional.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It has to be a plan for sure. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. Yep, that's exactly right. Yes, ma'am.
If you're developing with your spouse, you need to be training this child to be in not to, that one day he's going to be leading you and to be independent instead of making it think you.
Yeah.
And you're going to scare me.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. One time I remember when I was 15, I think, I was driving and I got a speeding ticket. It was the first of many at that age, I think. I went through string, and then I haven't had any in like 15 years, I think. Oh, no, I did get one last year. But anyway, but besides that, I didn't have any for a long time. So I got a speeding ticket, and at that time you could go down and do this thing at the courthouse called it was like this, as a teenager you could go down there and they'd do kind of like this little teen court thingy, and you could get your ticket dismissed if you were, under 16 or under 18. And So I got the ticket, and I was supposed to go to the courthouse, and I asked my dad if he would go with me, and he wouldn't go with me. He said, no, you made this mistake yourself, so you need to go yourself. And I remember even crying. I said, I don't even know where the courthouse is. I don't know where to go. I don't know what door to go into. I was just, I was like, please help me. And he said, no, you did this, so you did it. And I did it. And then, after all my other 10 tickets, I did it all myself. So my point is, I feel like I'm a very independent person. I grew to be very independent, and I think that's how children should be raised and not be done for, where they're, everything is done for them, to where they get to the point where they're unself-sufficient. And so, it shouldn't be our goal for the children to be reliant on us. It should be our goal for them to be able to fly and do their own things without needing that assistance. But I specifically do remember that. But that was one of those times where it's like, he was not my friend. He made me very mad at the time. And so, but I remember, being able to navigate it, and I took care of it and handled my own situations, and grew up to do that. So as we look at, we're talking about focusing on our spouse. As marriages grow, they'll either probably get stronger or weaker. I doubt that they just stay absolutely the same. I think that there's either a weakening or a strengthening. And, if we're not, there's always going to be outside influences that are going to try and, destroy marriage. That's what Satan wants to do. He wants to destroy the home life. He wants to destroy marriages. He wants to destroy Christian homes. And, he's always working on that. And so if we're not aware of that, or aware of the temptations, or aware of the things that are around us, then we're very naive about that. And not necessarily am I talking about necessarily affairs. I mean, that is something, or that is prevalent, but there's a lot of things. There's addictions, there's just complacency. There is just absenteeism. There's so many more things that can tear a marriage apart, but that's what Satan wants, is all these things to begin to pull spouses apart. And so I truly believe that it comes down to our heart. What does our heart want? What are we looking for? And when I mean our heart, I mean really our head, but what's our heart looking for? What are we wanting? I feel that some people say that they would never put themselves in X situation because, that might be a temptation to them, or they ended up in an affair and they never meant to at all. They never had any inclination to. I really don't believe that. I believe that your heart wanted that, and that's why you allowed yourself to be in a situation where that would happen. It may be easy for you to say, I never meant to, but you did mean to, and that's why you allowed yourself to be in a situation. So I feel that we have to guard our heart. If we don't begin to guard our heart and our thoughts, then if those thoughts aren't allowed in our heart, then we can't want that. So we must purify our heart and our actions. And I think that will protect us a lot from a lot of outside influences. So I have 5 minutes left, so let's turn with me to Proverbs 4:23. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So meaning not necessarily your beating heart, but your mental heart, guard your mind against outside influences that are difficult, that are problems. It may be, it can be a whole range of things. It may not necessarily be adultery. It could be addictions. It could be a lot of things. But if we're not guarding our heart against those things, then they will come in. And if we really truly examine, what it is, if it's something we have an interest in or an interest we want, our heart will go back to that. Our mind will go back to that. So we maybe have to be more careful in certain areas than others. But our heart will find those things that if we're secretly longing for that. So we have to really guard ourselves against those things. We really have to be wise in the outside influences that can come. Selfishness also too as well. When we're selfish of our time, selfish about our own things that we want, selfish about our actions, that's another thing that tears families apart. And just like I spoke about earlier, if we're not redeeming our time by focusing on our spouse, not ourself, then, that's not time that's redeemed, and that's bonds that are built in other areas. And so it may be that sometimes you may be too selfish with your own things, or maybe your own time, but maybe you're also too selfish to not give in to spend time with your spouse with things maybe you don't always have an interest in. Maybe that's their interest and you're not as interested, but that is something you can still do together. So it's, it has to be a give and take there. It can't always be that, one way or the other. So if those bonds are broken between the spouse, then that breaks down with the children. And then once again, then there's that same issue of respect being broken. So it all goes down, it all flows down, like a pyramid. If the top or if the foundation's broken, the whole thing is going to crumble. And so with that strong foundation of a strong marriage, and the foundation of them together helps make that whole family stronger. If the foundation's broken, it's all going to crumble. So I know that everything I've said tonight is not any rocket science, anything you haven't ever heard before, something from outer space. It's none of those things, but maybe it's just some things that you can think about, that you can re-examine, you can look at again, and make some applications. Does anybody have any comments they want to say before we close? I think we have a minute, maybe 30 seconds. Yes, ma'am. Right. That's exactly right. Anything else? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's good attention. And Sunday, I'm not teaching, so you don't have to applaud. I think it'll be more marriage stuff. Excellent. All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time.